Hello. Hi, this is Professor Bei, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, the Colonial Crucible. So, what happened after the conquest? How were they able to colonize, right? So, we're going to go over all that in this chapter. So, the rule by Spain and Portugal lasted 3 centuries in Latin America. And it was, a legacy of conquest and slavery, and it remained very strong until the 1800s. They adopted this system of hierarchy to keep control, and during that time, for 3 centuries, they intermingled and fought. And the priorities of the Portuguese and Spanish were to gain economic wealth in these colonies. And there will be 2 major economies. For the Portuguese was sugar plantations, and for the Spanish will be the mines that will produce silver, silver in the Americas. And that shaped the emerging colonial economy. The gold was quickly exhausted, so gold, that's what they came for. But, it was, all withdrawn, I guess, and they couldn't find anymore. So they went into silver in the mines. And instead of the Brazil wood, the sugar will become the main economy of Brazil, of the colonial Brazil. So the silver mines were in Zacatecas in Mexico, or as it was called, New Spain, and Potosi, which is in Peru, which is the current Bolivia, right? Were operated in the 1540s. And the sedentary inhabitants attracted a lot of these indigenous migrants from central Mexico to come work in the mines. And the migrants also became miners of Potosi on a mountain plateau of 12,000 feet above sea level. Potosi is very high up above sea level, so you can suffer from altitude sickness when you get there. But it's a beautiful town, very colonial. It was one of the richest back then in the colonial times because of the mines that produce silver, but now is one of the poorest of Bolivia, which is sad. For the 1600s, Potosi became the most populous city in America, they say. So in Argentina, in the plains of Argentina, they were growing mules to provide transportation for a lot of this work that they were doing. And a lot of the indigenous women in the Andes, they were weaving cloth to dress the miners. And the farmers at the lower altitudes, they sent food to feed them. So there's this primary export production, which will be, the primary is the silver. That stimulated the secondary supply activities. So primary is silver, and secondary is like these mules, right? You have the farmers producing the food for the workers, and the cloth that was being produced to dress the miners. So you have the primary and the secondary, right, activities in here. The Peruvian capital was established at Lima, near a seaport. So they could have access to bring the goods back to Spain. And in Mexico, routes connected northern mines with Mexico City to the port of Veracruz in the south of Mexico. That's where it will be headed out. And northern Mexico was a meeting point for all sorts of people, while the southern Mexico, along with Guatemala, had the more indigenous population, right? The Zapotec, the Mixtec, and the Maya. Central America and the Caribbean became part of the supply network for the northern silver mines, and I'll show you that in a little bit in the map. So here's the city of Potosi. It's beautiful, very colonial. You'll find this beautiful building. This is La Casa de la Moneda, which is the house of currency and coins, I guess. And this is a picture of me visiting the beautiful city of Potosi. In Potosi, you can find these mines, and the conditions were horrific during the colonial times, and it's still very bad today. I'm gonna post a video for you guys to watch about the situation today, And if you want to see a very good movie that was done in the 2000s, I don't remember exactly which date, it's called the Devil's Miners. I think it's the Devil's Miners. And it's about children working in this mines, right? In these horrible conditions. It was made by a German director and, was filmed in Potosí, Bolivia. The crown received the royal fifth, which is a tax, getting 20% on mining, right? Prime source of the revenue for the colonial times for the Spanish state. So they got a lot of money on taxing with the royal fifth, which is a 20% tax on mining. To monitor the royal fifth, the crown sent viceroys to govern instead of the king, right? So 2 viceroyalties were established by the 1540s, and one is New Spain, which is Mexico and Central America and the Caribbean, and Mexico City as the capital. And the second viceroyalty was Peru, much of South America, and Lima was the capital. And the viceroys were sent by Spain with a whole entourage of people to represent the king in the Americas. And they also had an archbishop and a high court that came along with them. The third viceroyalty was established in 1717. It was called New Granada, and is the modern Colombia, right? Because of the gold that was there. The fourth viceroyalty will be Rio de la Plata, in the port of Buenos Aires, Argentina, was created in 1776 to control Potosí silver taxes. So you have the 2 first viceroyalties that you saw, which is New Spain, and number 2, the other viceroyalty is Peru. And then you have New Granada in 1717 and Rio de la Plata in 1776 that were created later on to control more of the taxes. Peru and Mexico remain the core areas of Spanish colonization. So core means where the main production, main revenue went to Spain. So you have Peru and Mexico as the main ones, the core. So here's a map of the viceroyalties. You can see here, Viceroyalty of Brazil, which we'll talk about it in a little bit. And you have the Viceroyalty of Peru, which was these dark green areas that you see, right? Including Chile and all this area of Peru, Bolivia, right? And a little bit of other countries here like Ecuador and stuff. So you have those, and then Viceroyalty of New Spain included all of this in North America, including Mexico, parts of the United States, okay? And we'll learn more about the Louisiana Purchase later on that happened in 1763. And you have the Rio de la Plata. Okay, plata means silver, huh? And they will have access to the ocean through Buenos Aires here. Okay, so you have Rio de la Plata, and then New Granada, which included Panama and some parts of Central America. Okay, so the first main viceroyalties were the Viceroyalty of Peru and New Spain, and then later on the New Granada and Rio de la Plata are added to control everything. So what happens in Brazil? In Brazil, we have the sugar, right? And Brazil has sugar plantations by the northeastern coast. And in the principal centers, they say Pernambuco and the Bay of All Saints, okay? For the Portuguese crown, the taxes on exported sugar and on imported goods with profits from sugar were the main sources of revenue from Brazil. So sugar is the main source of revenue from Brazil, colonial Brazil. Sugarcane had to be milled, and they usually, get the juice from the sugar canes, and then they boil it and then make it into cakes in order to be exported as sugar, right? And people rich enough to build these sugar mills had a lot of power, okay, in government and also economically. They're called ingenio or engine, became known as mill lords, señores de ingenio. They own hundreds of slaves working in the sugar mills, and they lorded it. They were like really high in our authority to their neighbors that depended on that mill, because some people will grow the sugar, but they don't have enough money to build those sugar mills, right? So a lot of people depended on these people, and they were the richest and the most powerful at the time. So in Brazil, a big engenho was a complex, very expensive to build, because imagine a town where you house slaves, includes a chapel, stables, storage facilities, and workshops and barracks, like slave quarters where people slept, right? All the slaves. This did not allow any urban development. You have these huge compounds, that are built specifically for that sugar mill, and that was a mini city in itself, right? So you don't have a lot of urban developments in this countryside where you have the sugarcane plantations. Outside of the sugar production areas, most of the colonial Brazil was sparsely settled. The south of Sao Paulo was Jesuit missions in the forest that settled, and they were Christianizing everybody and educating the natives outside of the tropics. And sugar in Brazil was never as precious as silver, so it did not produce as much money for the crown as the silver did in the Spanish Americas. So it was less powerful, having sugar as the main economy. The Portuguese were focused on these rich African and Asian outposts. They were more focused on that. So Brazil remained very poor, less popular, less developed, and loosely governed. 2 viceroyalties were established but had no authority like in Spain, okay, like the Spanish viceroyalties. So we're going to talk about, when you talk about the colonial times, you talk about the power of hegemony. What is hegemony? It's the leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. And they do it by stating their supremacy, authority, and power. So you have the superiors and the inferiors. And they make that leadership, dominant leadership by certain group of people, or it could be a country. And this will happen in the colonial times with the people, okay? And both Spanish and Portuguese crown had limited resources during the colonial times. They didn't have any large armies, and the American-born descendants were a small minority, really small, the Europeans, right? And, descendants of the Europeans, even in the core areas. So how did they maintain control over America for centuries, You're just wondering, how did they do it? And you're going to find out about it in the next video, because I don't have no time to explain the 2 things that helped maintain that control over the colonies. So stay tuned and watch the next video, okay? Bye!